And we are live for Religion Zero 54. Ah, look at that. It happened.
There we go. 54. That's more than a year, isn't it? That's a year's worth of programming.
Yeah.
For like
and
a
change.
weekly. Yeah. And brilliant. Good on you.
Yeah. I think we started like April last year? Like
around that time.
Right after the Coof. Yeah. Right
Just
after the Backstreet Boys reunion tour.
Hey, Tom, good to have you with us, man. Yeah, it's been a while. Look at that.
Oh, yeah. So today's topic, we're talking about Jesus.
Well, happy 4th of July to all the Americans. You can't just jump into it, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to talk about why we're doing our topic, but you know what? It all works. It's all, we're just, one of us has a cart and a horse, and I'm not sure which, but
fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, it is 4th of July. Happy 4th of July to everybody. When us Americans separated from Brooke and Brooke's people.
Close enough.
Yeah. Yeah, so today we decided to do a themed episode talking about the church instead of the early church, we're talking about early America in the church. And kind of how Christianity influenced or didn't influence certain things. I think it'll be fun. I think we hopefully will learn some things that they didn't teach you in textbooks when you're in 4th grade. So that'll be interesting.
No pressure. Yeah, just reciting American history.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Clearly,
people totally aren't emotionally and religiously invested in this, so there definitely won't be any triggered people. Well, before we start that, Brooke, how was your last week or two? I think we had a 1 week break, but
we had a 1 week break, and I mean, I guess we're going to be maybe changing up the schedule of the show. I guess we could discuss that at some point. But I had a very good 2 weeks. In fact, this week I'm taking some time off. I'm going with a friend of mine out to this kind of ancient estate. One of these lords has like a big thing. He's opened it up like a hotel. So we're going out there from Monday to Friday. So yeah, I'm going to be doing some relaxing, taking in some summer sun, a little barbecuing, drinking some mead. It's going to be a good time. So looking forward to that. Apart from that, not too much is going on. I'm dealing with some tax matters, which is never fun. And I'm still on board with the charity. We've had a little bit of a mix-up going on with those guys. I've got some work to do for them, so I'm going to hopefully bang that out some point this week. But overall, been pretty good. I haven't actually been going to the gym, though, Conk. I mean, Robert Frank would be so disappointed. I've missed an entire week here, and it looks like I'm going to miss 2 weeks because I'm going on this trip. So, I'm kind of feeling it, and the weather hasn't been great either. Even though it's summer, it's overcast, it's rainy, it hasn't been great. So gotta shake it up. Up a little bit. But how about you, man? How have you been for the last few weeks?
Ooh, it's been interesting, I would say. I went pretty hardcore on the no carbs the last 2 weeks, except for yesterday. Yesterday, I'm like, it's a 3-day weekend. We have Monday off, even though today is Sunday and it's 4th of July. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to complain. So I was like, you know what? We'll chill. It's a holiday weekend, for MERICA. And so I was like, whatever. And so I went, ate all my favorite carb loaded foods. And today I feel like pure shit.
Yeah.
The carb hangover is like 8 times worse than normal. So I'm alive. I ran to the gas station this morning, almost took my motorcycle. It's a perfect day out. And then I realized I don't have a cup holder, so I wouldn't be able to bring back my Quick Trip American Redneck coffee. So, so I ended up taking the car. It made me a little bit sad. But yeah, we were rained out all of last week. It rained every day, like 6 days in a row. And so it is what it is. I did have some pretty awesome renters. They were a couple and a couple little kids from, what was it, Minnesota or Michigan, up north near the Canada border.
Yes.
And, both of them were drunk the entire time, but they were happy drunks, not angry drunks. And they just wanted to talk the whole time. So anytime they'd see me getting in and out of my car, going or coming from work, they wanted to come outside and chat for 15 minutes, slurring all their words. And you could like smell the booze from like 7 feet away. But, It was fun. They cleaned the whole place for me before they left. I checked it this morning because they left last night, and they cleaned the whole place. So all I really got to do is like laundry the bed sheets and towels. I'm like, that's it.
That's
they did
pretty cool.
they did pretty damn good. So yeah, I'm happy. And they stayed for a week. Got $800 check on Wednesday from them, and yeah,
Sweet.
it's probably the nicest one all the way through.
Cool.
So yeah, it's been going, like today specifically has sucked from the carb hangover, but the last 2 weeks have been pretty awesome. So
yeah. I mean, how long has it been since you had carbs then? Did you go for like a full month, or how long has it been?
Yeah, I was keeping it under 20 to 30 a day total.
Okay, real keto.
And then,
okay, good.
Yeah. And then yesterday I had all of them. every carb I ever made, and it was brutal today. I felt fine yesterday. I feel horrible today.
yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how that works. Yeah.
I mean, even for myself, I've kind of integrated one cheat meal a week sort of thing. But just for money and stuff, it's usually a thin crust pizza. But I get it on a Thursday, and there's usually leftover for Friday, so I get Thursday and Friday, and so that's because your body can adjust. You can work between fats as a fuel and glucose as a fuel. So I think it's kind of healthy to be able to adapt back and forth. But once you're kind of in a healthy state, though, but the first time getting back into carbs, yeah, it's rough. I remember.
Oh
that.
Yeah. It's your body's on high alert.
Yeah, it's like what
everything hurts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get on to the topic. How do we want to start this? Because there's a lot of history.
There is.
We're talking like 1600s to 1800s was my guess. But
yes.
But I mean, it's pretty influenced all the way throughout. I want to start with what is the main sect of religion in America was definitely Protestantism, right? Correct. It definitely overran way farther than Catholic, Orthodox, or really anything else, right?
Correct.
And in the 1800s, we birthed two new religions within our own borders. So that's
Did
cool.
you?
Yeah, we had the Mormons and we had the Jehovah's Witness, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah. We also got Scientology, if you want to throw that in.
And the 7-Day Adventists, I think.
Yeah. We got our, and it's all spin-offs of Protestantism. Well, Scientology, you could argue one way or another, but it's more hippie new age with aliens. But it was pretty interesting. They're all just kind of spin-offs of Protestantism that spinned off so far that it's hard to even call them Christian, you know?
But I mean, it makes a very unique culture in the United States. So if you want to know the difference of how the religions impacted the country, you just look at the difference between the United States and Mexico, which was dominated by Catholicism. And there's a huge difference in terms of the Protestant work ethic that was kind of seen. So that exists even to this day. So yeah, it's an interesting take, but yeah, Protestantism definitely made an impact thanks to of course, Church of England and Henry VIII, wanting to divorce,
No, we're our own thing.
Church of England,
Oh yeah. But I mean, speaking of that real quick, off topic, didn't England keep going back and forth between we're officially Protestant, we're officially Catholic, we're officially Protestant?
Yeah, the War of the Roses and the 100-Year War was because we still had the monarchy back then. So there were kind of subplots between, the Irish and others, some of the Catholic sects, to put a Catholic queen in place. So they were playing the Game of Thrones, and it was, between Protestants and Catholics. So it's pretty. I mean, it goes into the battle with the French as well, because at one point there were two popes. There was a pope in England, a pope in France, and a pope in Italy, and they both kind of excommunicated each other and all this very interesting history. The French had very big interests in trying to undermine the Protestant movement and install their own part of the monarch. And I think they did. I can't remember who it was. There was a king that was there, only spoke French, and I think he was Catholic. And that was, he didn't last very long. But it plays a big part. It plays a huge role in terms of how the culture will develop. Even to today, we're still seeing the echoes of that Protestantism, in England versus the France and the continent. So it's a big thing. Yeah.
And I would say, and this is something you brought up right before we went live, was talking about, if you look up, the UK and Europe now compared to America, we're still diehard on our religion. And it's interesting because Europe did way more killing for their religion, but now they don't have it. You know what I mean? Or it's on its last breaths.
It happened. It exploded in the colonies. So like the big movement of Christianity right now is South America, right? So Brazil is going through like national revival, Venezuela. And I guess a lot of that has to do with conflict and the instability of their economy and stuff like that. You tend to see a lot of religion. The colonies in Africa, Uganda, for instance, huge. I mean, there's a church in every corner in Africa practically. So it's very interesting that the Europe is going through a post-Christian reality, but we still have the echoes of a lot of that. While the colonies are just exploding, you guys included, right?
Yeah. It's also funny the least religious, at least it's a pattern I've seen. I don't know if I have the stats to back it up, but it seems like when you talk about post-Christian or post-religious, they're going way doubling down on the socialism, right? Relative to the religious places. Some of them tried it, like Venezuela, but look how that turned out. But
correct. I mean, that's a trend even amongst a lot of atheist friends that I have. They start off maybe as Christians, and as they become more atheistic, they just naturally become big government. And it's a complete shock to me because it's very difficult to kind of reconcile a benevolent God to the state. But they're looking for that moral authority, which of course we know atheism really has no answer to, and they just default to progressive ideology and statehood. So that's a very bizarre thing. And yeah, Europe is going through that. The EU is a fantastic inlight into that, the European project, which is the unification of all the European countries into a Euro superstate, basically to compete with the US and China and all this kind of thing. It's fallen apart. Because it was never, no political union ever lasts. We look at the USSR as a good example of that. But yeah, they're trying to do this kind of solidarity thing, but the cultures are so different. Yes, we may be European. Well, I'm not European. I'm from the Caribbean, but yes, but the French are very distinct from the Germans. The Germans are very distinct from the Dutch, right? It's not a cohesive environment of politics, religion, or anything to really bring the nation together.
Yeah. And so this is why I think America is interesting. Excuse me. So the first little prerequisite point is around this time, man, my throat.
Yeah, take it easy, man. Did you get some water? Do you want to get some water?
Oh, no, I got my redneck coffee. We're good.
What is redneck coffee?
Well, Quick Trip is a gas station. So here in Missouri, we're relatively southern attitudes, even though we're geographically in the middle.
Okay.
We're like the northernmost southern state is how I put it.
Right.
And most people prefer gas stations and gas station food to fast food, which is a very redneck thing. People have Quick Trip lifestyles is one of the big ones. The other big ones around here is called Casey's, and they actually cook pizza in the back of the gas station, and you can buy whole pizzas there and everything. And people here just, we have these weird redneck alliances to our preferred gas stations. And I grew up in a Quick Trip family. A lot of people, even a little bit more south, are way more into Casey's, and they kind of have their own little rivalry. But the fact that we have rivalry over our favorite brand of gas station food is its interesting thing. So that's why I call it redneck coffee, because
is it actually coffee, or is it like a sweet tea? What is it actually?
Oh no, yeah, it's so this is just what I do is I get black hot coffee and I pour it over ice while I'm there. So I'll fill this to the brim with ice and then pour the hot coffee in it, and then it mixes and kind of turns into like both caffeinated coffee, but also is like tastes like ice cold water too a bit. So it's both like refreshing when it's hot out and caffeine. So
well,
that's how I live.
to be fair, our co-host Amos also buys a lot of his food from a gas station. I remember making a couple of trips out. So I don't think that's limited to the southern states, because Minnesota is pretty up north. But fascinating. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Maybe it's more rural than it is southern. Maybe that's a better term for it. Because the renters, they were from Minnesota and they were pretty rednecky, as they would say,
And I mean, not to take too much time, what is a redneck? I've been hearing this expression for years and nobody could define what redneck is. They always send me to some comedian who's like, you might be a redneck if this, that, and
oh, Larry the Cable Guy.
right,
Yeah,
right.
He's a cartoon.
It doesn't define it.
Yeah,
it doesn't define, like, what is it? Like, okay, these are the traits that it could have, but what is it?
So yeah, redneck is kind of like country boy, farmer lifestyle. They wear a lot of camo and overalls and hunting orange, and all have trucks and kind of live in the woods, and they don't really care, and they hate all the city folk.
Okay.
Right. And they call them rednecks because they're outside all day and they wear hats, but their necks still get sunburnt all the time. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a pretty fair example. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just imagine a guy wearing overalls and his neck is always sunburnt and he has a piece of straw in his mouth all the time. He maybe some chewed tobacco, drives pickup trucks and wears camo clothes. That's rednecky, right?
That's rednecky. Okay.
Yeah. It's the country boys. We don't need no city living.
I see. I see. I'll look into it, man. I keep hearing the phrase, but it's like, well, what is it? What is it? It's obviously a running joke in America, so we don't have that out here.
Yeah, and like the common term for like Trumpians, like Trump's is a bunch of racist redneck followers or something like that.
Right.
Because the non-populated counties, like if you look at the election map, all of the blue counties are just the giant cities, and then literally every other county is red.
Yeah,
election maps. So yeah, so that's why they always have that saying like, "Oh, the city people like Democrats, and the rednecks out in the country like Trump."
Okay. I'll keep it in mind. I'll check it out.
But yeah, we're talking about primarily during that time, we like when it comes into the founding of America and early America, it was mostly Protestant, like we said. But what I noticed is when I was looking at statistics, it was statistically mostly like Baptist for a while. And then when Methodists came around in like the 1760s, that just exploded like a shockwave. And then that became the biggest after the 1800s. And I find that interesting because I personally went to a Methodist university in Illinois that was only one generation separated from like John Edwards and John Wesley. And, you know, and they weren't political authorities, but they were known as like religious authorities. And they're kind of like the big Methodist guys that was pushing their own brand that was separate from Baptist. And that spread like wildfire. And we were in one of the very first ever made Methodist universities, like Methodist specific. So they were really big on the church tradition and early church history and for the Americas and all that stuff, and learning about all of them, because it was like John Edwards is like first peeps in America, like his first generation of disciples started that university. So
pretty cool,
pretty interesting. Pretty cool. Yeah, in the 1800s. So it's pretty crazy.
I'm not too surprised by the Methodist movement. That was John Wesley. The one well, not the one thing, but the big thing that he got right, and ironically, the only church that keeps it to this day is the Jehovah's Witnesses, is he got evangelism right. He was, and that's the methodology, right? That is the method of evangelism. So he was the only one who pushed the idea that you got to get out of the church and you actually got to go out to the people, go door to door, and meet people where they're at. And that was how he started the church. So if you were like a new convert, you could not come to his church, or like you were not brought to a denomination. They would send every week somebody from the church, and they'd walk you through some of the basics of Christianity and so forth, till you kind of showed some dedication and maturity. Then you can come to the church. The Jehovah's Witnesses actually took that, and that's why they still exist today, even though they bleed members. Like 75% of their turnover is there, but they have that evangelistic outreach that Wesley and these people actually pioneered. Yeah, they're giving up on now. They don't do it anymore.
Yeah. And my university was really big on the Wesleyan quadrilateral.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like scripture's not enough. You also have to know church history and their church fathers and follow the tradition all the way to the year 2000s. And just try to see everyone else's take on scripture. And I was heavily against that. And most of my teachers didn't like me because I questioned that all the time, because tradition and doctrine and dogma changes, every couple generations, and they keep adding to it or changing everything. And I'm like, but the Bible is still like from that time. Why don't we just do that? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, there's a good reason for that, right? You read in the scriptures how the Apostle Paul would go and spend 6 months in Corinth or wherever. And what do we have from that? We have a letter. He was there for 6 months. Like, you really think everything that he taught in 6 months is in just the letters that we have?
In 20 minutes of reading, to get
so there's obviously a lot. No, I would criticize some, because obviously church traditions were eventually influenced by politics and stuff like that. So I, close to orthodoxy, but not entirely, because I see how the church became an institution that it probably was never intended to be. But yeah, I think pulling from the debates of the early church in like the first 300-400 years, that's helpful before it kind of conglomerated into these, these bodies where you can see the struggle. You can see where they were fighting to figure things out. And then everything after that, yes, it's taken as authority, but I always question it.
Yeah.
Because the one thing you can't say about any council that came after the Council of Jerusalem, at the end of it, the disciples then, they're deciding whether the Gentiles are to be included in the law of Moses. It always says, this appeared good to us and the Holy Spirit. And we can never confirm that second part on any council after that.
Yeah.
We
Or
can
ever.
say, they agreed, but do we know if the Holy Spirit thought that was a good idea? There's no way to tell. And it's a good pointer, but it's hard to take it as authority.
Yeah. And I think this is a good pivot point of talking about, like, when we're talking about politics and religion kind of intermingling and culture. Early America was definitely like a mix between democracy and individual rights, right? And Protestant work ethic, right?
Yes.
All of those kind of intermingled to each other to kind of create that that kind of mentality that we even still have today, mostly, depending on where you are geographically. Like we were talking about, big cities kind of do their own weird thing, but the general mass people still kind of have that idea of individual liberty and rights and Protestant work ethic and, the blue collar job lifestyle. That's still very huge around the non-big cities, right?
And for good reason too, because there was nothing, right?
Yeah.
There was not like a London. You could go to London, everything's established. Every pioneer that came to the New World had to basically fend for themselves, because there really wasn't any. There wasn't any government. There wasn't anything to really help people out, at least in the first couple hundred years. So it was those pioneering adventurers who took that upon themselves. And you're right; it exists probably better in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world to this day.
Yeah. They're trying to kill it, but it's still there.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I think the Russians have a form of that, but they're not in the same, like, they're very pro-Russia and, like, I'm Russian, and they have a very good national identity, but they're not expansionists.
Yeah.
They're not like Manifest Destiny. They're just kind of like, oh, well, we're the top of the food chain. We don't need to do anything, right? They think they've already arrived and it's done.
Exactly. But yeah. Then that was a big part of our thing, was that pursuing lineage building, because even though the Native Americans were there, we always thought the Native Americans were stupid because they don't got roads and cities and buildings and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't really need it. They were doing fine without us, And
I mean, depends on what you mean, right? What do you mean by they were doing fine?
Yeah, they weren't all starving to death, right? They weren't like,
sure,
if only someone would show us how to build roads and aqueducts, they were fine.
I suppose. I mean, they were killing each other. There were entire tribes of the.
Yeah, but so were we, over differences between how we interpret a book.
Eventually.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they were necessarily better off or worse off with that.
I personally feel they're better off, but that goes into the whole technology thing. But yeah, I think that interesting mix of work ethic, individual liberty, democracy, all of those kind of liberty type thinkings there, all kind of congomulated. Is that a word? I think I'm saying it right. Coagulated. That sounds funnier. They all coagulated together. And that kind of bred its own special culture that a lot of both the Protestants and the politics kind of just took the same direction in that way, right? Bring yourself out by your bootstraps, go do the hard work, relatively try to respect your neighbors, right?
Yeah.
And this is interesting because when we talk about, like, what is a Christian nation, and we're talking about the culture, actually the founding fathers, a good chunk of them were not that, actually. They weren't as religious fervent as the population was.
Probably not.
Yeah. And so, and I actually brought in a couple examples of that. And I think a lot of people argue that a lot of the founding fathers weren't necessarily Christian; they were just deist. Where they just believed, God created scientific principles and principles of morality, and then we're just going to go with those. We don't care about the Bible that much. It's kind of the attitude when I was looking in some of the early church fathers. The most common one, a lot of people, is Thomas Jefferson is the one they cite as like the most non-Christian founding father. He two separate times, like early 1800s and then like 1820, two different times he tried to make his own version of the Bible, and and it was mostly just cut and paste all the red letters where Jesus talked about being nice to people and doing your work and doing all these things, and he kind of cut out all of the story part.
Right.
And so he's like, this is my preferred Bible. Some Christians try to argue that he did that in order to simplify the Bible for Native Americans, but there's not a lot of evidence for that. They just kind of say that so they still feel good about Thomas Jefferson because he wanted to witness to Native Americans. But there's not a lot of evidence for that. They just say that. But yeah, Thomas Jefferson, he wrote his own Bible, and all he did was cut and paste the parts he liked of what Jesus said and kind of cut out all of the 10,000 bread loaves of fish and all of that kind of miracle parts. He just talked about the be nice to each other parts. He also said that religion should not be important in founding a government at all. He's quoted saying that a couple times. George Washington, he went to church, but he refused to participate in church because he didn't get the point of it. Apparently he would go to church every Sunday, but he wouldn't do communion. He wouldn't do the community prayers and the time of like kneeling and worshiping. He didn't do any of that. He just like sit there and watch it on Sunday because he was supposed to. But yeah, he refused to participate in that. And I thought that was interesting. And apparently George Washington never mentions Jesus or God in anything we've ever had of him written ever. Right. So that's pretty interesting. Ben Franklin, he said specifically he didn't give a crap about Christian institutions, and that was irrelevant to him. He kind of just talked about God exclusively, like in a general term. He didn't really care about the actual Christian aspect of it. Thomas Paine was also one of the big ones, and he was really key in the Revolutionary War. And he said, the fable of Jesus in the New Testament is what I contend it is obscene. He's going to say that a couple times, that he thinks the New Testament and the fable of Jesus is doing more harm than good, essentially, and that we don't need it. So it's very interesting that a lot of people talk about the founding fathers in a Christian nation, but the Christian nation really just comes from the culture of the everyday people. The founding fathers actually didn't care that much. Surprisingly, a lot of them. The one I saw that was for sure an exception was John Hancock. He wrote nonstop about prayer and fasting and church, practices like that. He tried to implement that in a lot of the stuff he wrote. Right. John Hancock wrote the big name at the bottom of the Independence. That's kind of what he's known for. Put your John Hancock there. He was hardcore into it, but it looks like the vast majority were not. So that's interesting, and that's not what a lot of people hear outside of the Thomas Jefferson Bible's stupid. A lot of people hear that all the time, but they're like, oh, everyone else was good Christian people with Christian principles. And a lot of them just like, yeah, God exists, but I'm busy.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's a lot that went into the founding of the United States. Yes, and a lot of it came from understanding the mistakes of the French Revolution. Charles Montesquieu is basically where we get the three branches of government from. John Locke, of course, the inalienable rights. So there's a lot of new Enlightenment thinking that went into it. And of course, looking at the failures of Europe and basically a caste system where you had the nobility and then you had like the second tier, which was the religion, the bishops and so forth. And then you had like everybody else. Obviously they fought against that. And a lot of it I think is grown out of, well, obviously, the way they've put all those things together. They've taken the Enlightenment thinking of human rights. They've taken Montesquieu's divisions of power, and they've incorporated the Christian work ethic. And it was culturally Christian, just like you have secular Catholics today. They're Catholics in name only. I'm not surprised, you're going to have, everybody says they're a Christian. In fact, my Russian friend, she says she's a Christian and she's never even stepped foot in a church as far as I know.
And except all on modern American politicians.
Yeah. I mean, even out here, the Church of England is a club, right? That's like, if you want to do well in business and like rub shoulders with the nobility, you join Church of England, right? It's the elite club. That's the religion of the rich in England. So yeah, I think the founding fathers were not particularly invested in that because they saw that as the second estate. They basically saw that as an institution that can be used to oppress, the people, as they'd seen in England, throughout the centuries in Europe. Which is why, they try to ensure that's what is it, the Second Amendment, where there's, the government shall not establish any type of formal religion, was to basically eradicate that entire second estate. They did not want the religion aspect to have that kind of dictatorial power over the people. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, there are religious writings. I haven't followed it too much, but the philosophy and so forth comes from the failings of Europe, and we can see why they would not invest a great deal, because if you did, you'd have a second estate, right? So you may not have the nobility, but you'd have like the second tier of people kind of ruling, and that's what they wanted to avoid. So. Yeah, good on them.
Yeah, very interesting. And that kind of moves into the idea of like separation of church and state, right? We hear we're a Christian nation, but we also have separation of church and state, and at the forefront of it, it sounds like, contradictions, right? How can we be a Christian nation and also a separation of church and state? So I found an interesting video where a guy was like, he had a text document of the entire Constitution and just did, the Control F, find words. God, it's not in there. Jesus, it's not in there. Christianity, it's not in there. Religion is not in there, actually. But religious is. There's a single sentence that says religious, and it says, I wrote it down here, that the public office has to have an oath to the Constitution, but there should be no religious test for public office. And so the only time it says religious is actually going against it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does say creator, though.
Yeah.
That all men are endowed by their creator. So it doesn't say God explicitly, but yeah, it is kind of endowed with the idea that everybody has innate human rights that come from a creator.
Yeah. But I mean, you could still argue that from like a non-theist position too, that we have creators. It could be your parents. It could be, primordial sludge.
I'd be a stretch to believe they'd think that back in the 1776, but
yeah,
it could probably be argued now. I don't think that was their intent when they were writing the document.
Yeah. And I mean, it still goes in line with like deism as opposed to Christianity, which is the whole kit and caboodle of the New Testament. Jesus, God intervening in our lives kind of thing. Because deists, is kind of the set it and forget it God. And usually,
it's the influence of John Locke, right? So I mean, every person in America was that you're endowed with the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? They took that from Locke, and Locke very much argued human rights from a religious perspective, that it was God ordained. He actually put it as life, liberty, and the pursuit of and the right to hold property. But I think Jefferson or one of them wanted to include taxes, and it's kind of like, well, we can't necessarily take money from people if they're entitled to own property, and we can't infringe it. So he changed it to the pursuit of happiness. I think that's one of the Federalist people. I can't remember which one.
Spicy.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see the influence of Locke that comes into that, and he argued it from the religious perspective. The alternative, which is something I've heard a lot of libertarians arguing this, and I disagree with them, is there are no fundamental human rights. The rights only exist as to what the government allows. And the problem with that interpretation is then they can never really, you can't have a human rights violation. You just have a failure of the government to enforce whatever it is. So it's not really, a genocide is not an act against humanity. It's just a failure of the government to act. So you really don't have a violation unless the human being in itself has inalienable value. And that's kind of the disconnect. So the founding fathers took a side to go with Locke, that human beings have intrinsic value just for being human beings, and that's revolutionary. That is not seen anywhere else I mean, it was attempted in the French Revolution, but they had tiers of people. They had like, different. I can't remember what the secondary parliament was called, but there were different levels to the whole thing. The America was kind of the first place that was pioneered. Like, no, it's the individual has the rights. It's not granted by any estate. It's not granted from God. Well, it is in that sense, but everybody's got it. Everybody's equal.
Yeah. Which is interesting when you talk about slavery and all that, and if they were people or not, and a lot of people have those weird arguments. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I think also when we talk about the Constitution, it's also good to talk about what is it, the First Amendment, right? Part of the First Amendment, it's not just free speech or press or whatever. It also says freedom for the right to worship what you choose, right?
Correct.
And that doesn't say you have to be Christian or you have to be anything, right? You don't have to be Muslim, you don't have to be Catholic, you don't have to be Protestant, you don't have to be Jewish. And that's one of the earlier documents as well, because it was obviously after the Revolutionary War and all of that. But
and they saw what happened in England with the Game of Thrones over religion, trying to put a Protestant or Catholic queen. They saw the problems that came with that, having a state religion.
Yeah. Thank you for being the example of what not to do. We appreciate your service.
Yeah, but we'll get to the slavery issue because we did that first. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we can move into it now. We talked about most of the main introductory points that I wanted to hit.
Yeah.
Slavery was a very interesting thing. First of all, most people always say Abraham Lincoln was the big guy that stopped all slavery from a legal sense, but his personal beliefs were not that, right?
Correct.
He did it because he had so much pressure from the common folk to do it. He personally didn't care that much about slavery. He was fighting over, because most of it from his part was federal versus state rights, right? Mm-hmm. That was a big part of it. And he said if he could, there's a quote that people always throw around is like Abraham Lincoln said, if I could end the Civil War without, freeing the slaves, I would have done it.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that we have, giant 100-foot statues of him in Washington, D.C., but he was still kind of pro-slavery.
I don't know if he was pro-slavery, but I think he ultimately, the Emancipation Proclamation made a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm sure people sign legislation they don't agree with all the time, but he did it, and the country did go to war over that, amongst other issues. So credit where credit is due. Even if it was an unintended consequence, it definitely made a huge impact on the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something I learned recently, and I haven't digged too deep in it yet, but I don't know if you heard this. But one of the reasons apparently we got our slaves from other countries, like specific countries, was because we didn't have to deal with yellow fever and all the diseases associated with it. Because, everyone always hears when the Spanish and Europe got to, South America and Central America, they all got wiped out because of diseases, because the diseases didn't intermingle, right?
Yeah.
There's actually some evidence and writings that the Aztecs were winning the fight up until they all got sick.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, even though they didn't have guns, it was the germs that did more than because the whole guns, germs, and steel argument. Yeah. But actually, the guns and steel didn't play that much of a part. Apparently, the Aztecs were more battle ready than the Europeans were. It's just that 90% of them, give or take, died.
The European viruses, correct?
Yeah, and apparently that germ theory and that germ issue is also spread into who we took as slaves, because apparently if you took them from specific countries, they would all mostly die just like the Aztecs did. But they found certain populations that didn't die to yellow fever and all of the diseases of the day then. And it wasn't so that, it didn't affect them as bad. And so they would take them so they didn't just go steal a bunch of people and they all just die right away and they lose their money, which is kind of an interesting part of it. That a lot of people don't talk about that. But because you would expect that, if we stole a bunch of people from Africa, the Caribbean and all that, wouldn't they all die like the Aztecs did? But apparently they didn't, and that's why a lot of people chose those places. It wasn't necessarily for other reasons that people say, but they didn't die on the boat on the way there from a bunch of diseases.
Interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
That's pretty fucked up.
yeah, exactly. It's a whole new messed up level people don't talk about.
That's pretty messed. I mean, there's a lot to the slavery issue. Britain again was one of the first countries to try and actually put an embargo on slavery. So we actually bought like all the slaves, and we've been like England has been paying it off for like 100 and something years. We only finished it in 1998 or something like that. We finally paid off the debt for that. So they did it the way the best they could. How they just basically bought up the entire industry, and then they sent ships to embargo the slavers so that they couldn't send slaves anywhere else. And it down there bankrupted the country. It was a moral imperative, like, plus industrialization. I'm not going to lie, right? A very big part of rice slavery, without much intervention, the market would have killed slavery, was that machinery was doing the work of like 10 slaves, right? For less money that you don't have to feed, right?
Yeah.
So the market was a very big influence, as well as there was, the whole Enlightenment thinking. And again, the work of John Locke had a lot to do with that. So yeah, England was one of the first. And since they couldn't get the slaves to Europe, a lot of them went west, right? It went to the Americas, and not a hell of a lot either. I don't know what the exact number is, but that's what basically happened. And that's basically England was the first country to set about to abolish slavery as a Christian nation. And they did it bankrupting the country because it was the right thing to do. You don't hear that very often, right? England is like the big racist, evil empire, colonialism. Yeah. It nearly bankrupted the goddamn country, but yeah, sure.
Big oofs. But from the religious aspect of slavery, it's interesting because you would get Christians on both sides trying to argue for or against it, right? Because obviously the Old Testament and a little bit of the New Testament does talk about slavery, but their version of slavery is very different than what actually happened. Yeah.
Very different.
And I think that's a common problem with a lot of modern religion interpretations of scripture in general is words change over time, right?
Correct.
So even though they're using the same word, it means a different thing. It kind of reminds, this is the thing I always like to bring up when we talk about language and trying to read the Bible and all that stuff, is in the Flintstones, they were having a gay old time. Were they practicing homosexuality in the 1970s cartoon, The Flintstones?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same word, but it has completely different meanings. And that's the same thing with slavery. And I'm sure we've talked about it here before. I can't remember what episode, but the biblical slavery of the time, from what I've read in the Old Testament specifically, was if you owe debt to someone, you could, you could sell yourself to them for 7 years. You work 6 years, and then on your 7th year, they let you free, and it doesn't matter how much money you owe them. You could owe them $1,000, you can owe them $1 billion, but no matter what, you paid it off in 7 years at the max. In fact,
many times that was a path to feed one's family. Like if you could get yourself into a big, rich general, lord, whoever, and that was like your family was set. You knew that they weren't going to starve. So in many ways, it's very different from what we had within the last 200 years. That was kind of, the big difference between the two.
Yeah, it almost kind of reminds me of internships that we have now where you like live and work at the place. I've done a couple of those before. They feed you, they give you a bed, and you stay there for a year, give or take. And then after that, you've completed it. Now you have all this experience and contacts for future jobs as well. Because if you were a good indentured servant slave in the Old Testament, that actually helped you, right?
Yeah. Correct.
And a little fun part about that is they also gave you a wife while you were there if you wanted one and you didn't already have one. So if you were a single dude in your 20s, you could just go there and just get a free wife. You would just get one of the guys as side chicks, and they just give it to you, and then you would decide if you want to stay married afterwards or not. But the boss got to keep the kids, which is interesting because that's free labor. It's free real estate. Yeah. But that's that. And I think that pivotal issue of like the difference between biblical slavery and modern slavery of their time was that they're using the same word. So people used to always say, well, the Bible talks about slavery all the time. And there's like a letter in Paul talks about, don't try to actively run away as a slave unless you have an opportunity. it's not a big deal kind of thing. I think that was in First Corinthians. I know he talks about it. And then I believe one of the epistles was about a slave, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Which one was it? It was one of the shorter ones that was like just one chapter.
Was Can't recall.
Titus? Yeah, it might have been
no,
Titus or Philemon, one of those.
Yeah, one might have been Philemon. Yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, it was a reality. It's been a reality throughout all of you. It's a fucking reality today, right? We have this shit going on right now. In fact, China has a big thing. Lebanon, they're selling African slaves now. It's ridiculous, but it's been a part of human history, and not the good kind. Well, not to say that there's a good kind, but not the biblical kind. It is the bad kind, where basically you're sold into servitude with bad conditions, sex trafficking, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, human trafficking is crazy. Yeah,
we have that today. In fact, Qatar, they abolished slavery. I think they abolished it 6 times, and the last one was like 2004, right?
Yeah,
that was like the last time, but they did it like 6 years before that, and then 4 years before that, and so forth.
Yeah,
so it still exists, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there's some girl that's making the rounds talking about human trafficking because she was trafficked, and she's been on a bunch of shows like Timcast and all of those, bigger ones to talk about.
The North Korean girl.
No, not the North Korean girl. It was like some girl named Eliza, and she's like American and got trafficked in America.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And her name's Liza or Eliza or something like that. And she got trafficked when she was in her teens and got out of it. And now she's like, trying to put awareness that, yes, we have human trafficking in America. Right. It's just on the down low black markets crap, because most people know the prostitutions of like pimps and all of that kind of stuff, but this is a whole different ball game where they'll take you cross country and it's a whole organization kind of thing. So it's kind of crazy.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, I agree. It's very disturbing. Very disturbing.
Yeah. And speaking of my old college, one of the gas stations that was right off of I-70, which is a huge interstate that takes you all the way left to right from both sides of the coast. It lasts the whole way across America, one road. And it connects Kansas City to Denver. And I've lived in both of those, so I know that road very familiar. But the I-70 gas station by my college was one of the biggest drop-off points where where people would, go behind the building and exchange people.
Wow.
In random parts of the night, and all those random crap, or you'd see like truck drivers get out and then somebody else would get in and drive it away kind of crap.
Wow.
And apparently it was trailers full of people, and a lot of people were aware of it, but apparently the cops had a hard time like catching them because they were good at it.
Right.
But yeah, and that was huge. So they used to do like protests and marches and like would stand there and say, did you know X amount of people, a couple thousand people a year are trafficked at this spot, and they kind of did their college protesting stuff there. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
That is crazy.
But yeah, it was this huge, truck stop off of I-70 that a lot of that happened at. It's pretty nuts.
I mean, we have a great deal of that going on. Even in England, we've had, grooming gangs going after very young girls from a very young age, thousands, and they went on for decades. The police knew about it and they didn't want to be called racist, and they just let it happen. And I mean, that's a very stark reminder that if the government is not going to protect little young girls and in their teens, they're probably not going to give a shit about you. Right. That's kind of one of the lessons. And to this day, they don't want to release the reports. They don't want to admit everybody who could have been on the take. It's a huge scandal, and the government is doing everything they can to basically try to be like, nothing to see here. And it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting what they let, all for political correctness, because a lot of the perpetrators, let's say, were, not of English descent, and, they were the wrong color, so they didn't want to be called racist, so they just let them do what they want, and destroyed thousands of people's lives.
It's irritating.
Yes. It's disgusting, man. This world is so screwed.
And then let's hit on that last part that we wanted to talk about: manifest destiny in religion.
Manifest destiny,
and then we'll open it to chat if they'd
exciting topic.
Yeah. So manifest destiny is essentially our God-given purpose to expand west and keep going, right?
Correct.
because a lot of early America is literally just the East Coast. It didn't really go much further than that for a while.
Yeah, the original 13 colonies.
Yeah, and then there was like, what was it, the Louisiana Purchase, where we kind of bought the other half of America.
Yeah,
for nothing. It was like $1 million,
like a bunch of beads or something. I can't remember. Yeah, it was like no money.
Yeah, because I think we originally bought. Yeah, because that's how we got the Native Americans out, is we traded dumb stuff. And it's funny, the Native Americans were thinking they were pulling a fast one on us, and we thought we were pulling a fast one on them, and we did. Because they're like, you can't own land. That's stupid. That's like me selling you my imaginary friend for $50. They're like, that's stupid. They're like, no, we do claim property rights. Get out or we'll shoot you. Oh, okay, this is stupid. We shouldn't have done this. Yeah. They actually think you can own land, because Native Americans didn't understand people couldn't own land. You could own your house and your clothes and your gun or your weapon, but they didn't understand the concept of that we believed in owning land. Correct. And so both of us thought we were pulling a fast one on the other, but since we had the firepower, ours went through.
Somebody got the short end of the stick. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. But I think the whole west half of the Mississippi River, which goes all the way down the center of the U.S., I believe that was French owned, and we bought it from France, even though they didn't do anything with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think because that was part of again, like the French influence in Canada. So we have like Quebec and these other places. So I think that was a big part of it, and it was because of France was running out of money, right? Fighting the English as they do. I mean, our longest enemy in England is going to be the French, right? Even to this day, even though everything's peaceful, it's kind of like, no, we still shit on the French. Right?
Yeah, we do too. We always make fun of. We always call them cowards. They're both pious, stuck-up assholes, but are also cowards. That's the American interpretation of France.
You all stuck them with the bill for the revolution, right? So it's kind of like they fund the revolution, and then it's like, okay, thanks for. It was like, are you going to pay back this money? Okay, thank you, bye bye. And basically that was not not great for the French.
Yeah.
But it expansionism. It was a huge part of it. Homesteading was a part of that. The advent of the railroad was huge. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of innovations that came around basically around the 1800s, when it really, that kind of imperialist, like, let's take this land. You don't see that anywhere else. I can't think of any other country that's experienced that type of expansion within recent history.
Yeah.
Like the last of the big empires was apart from the colonial empire, the English, we went out and we had like 1/5 of the world. But in terms of taking territory, the Americans did it like nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And we believed it was divinely inspired, right?
Yes. City on a hill.
God chose the Europeans and now turned Americans, chose them to go destroy everybody and take everything. It's kind of interesting.
But it worked. So was it wrong? Who knows?
I would argue it was wrong, but that's just me. I don't think God was definitely intervened in there. But
who knows?
We felt like we did, because there was this was a big part. We got to talk about a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but like, there's this big thing where like, should we kill all the Native Americans or should we try to convert them to Christianity? Right.
Yes.
And that was a common, back and forth debate back then of all the, the general population normie Christians is, should we try to convert them all or should we just shoot them all because they're not Christians and they're savages and they're on stuff we want? Right. And I think that's interesting. And I was watching someone was reading some old letters they found of just some random girl that was going west for the Manifest Destiny stuff. And she's like, well, all these people want to shoot them, but I don't. I think they could make great Christians if we just teach them to eat 3 meals a day and wear proper clothing. And like, I don't think we should be shooting them all. And it was just some lady's journal that was, in the wagon going west. And it's a very interesting topic of them talking about that. But I mean, either way, I think both of those they're debating the wrong thing, in my opinion. Because they're
debating.
I don't know. It's just like a non-issue to me. It's like, should we tax them 40% or 50%? I'm like, why are we talking about that? I don't want any.
I mean, it's a different time, right? So, I mean, we're in the information age. Land doesn't have the same value as it did back then. Back then, land was resources, land was power. The old aristocracy of Europe, you're a landholder. That's how you became a lord, right? You had an estate. So it was the more land, the richer the country. And I mean, a lot of states would trade land back to the federal government to like write off certain debts. So Texas, for instance, I think it went all the way up to Colorado at one point, or was it Idaho, like the bottom of Idaho? After the war, they had, colonial debt. Sorry, not what was it? Was the what was the South called?
Confederates.
Confederates. Thank you. The Confederate, they had a lot of debt, and they basically settled with the federal government by chopping off and giving everything above where the Texas border is now, that ran all the way up to Idaho, to the state, and that's how they settled their debt. So land had a very different value to them than we would understand today. So that's I understand their thinking. That's how you got wealth. Wealth was land. Kind of like how sheep were in the Bible. You had a lot of sheep. You didn't necessarily have it, but you were rich, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a different time. They had a different vision of what was valuable.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and also just speaking of like, Union versus Confederate kind of thing, Missouri, where I am, is like huge in that. It was one of the biggest populated swing states at the time.
Right.
So like we were huge in the Civil War. We weren't really established. We might have had a couple people here during the Revolutionary, but not really. But we were huge in the Civil War. So Missouri Civil War, and like the Lewis and Clark expedition, they went right through Kansas City. There's all these like historical places where they were and all this stuff. Cool. But yeah, the Civil War was huge here. The church my grandma goes to got burned down in the Civil War by the Confederates. It was built in 1817, I think, and then got burned down and rebuilt in 1844. So
cool.
It's old, and it was built when Abraham Lincoln would have been in high school. Yeah, that's nuts.
I love how you say it's old, like 250 years, bro. There's a wall that's just around the corner that's 1,000 years old from the Romans. So it's all relative.
Old.
It's American old. Yeah, there's a door out here in one of these churches that goes back to the Vikings in 800 years. So it's all kind of relative in that respect. But
America's
I understand
fresh for us. America's fresh.
Yeah.
It's old for America. But because most things here, like a historic house here was built in like 1920, right? Yeah. We don't have the old school like castles and rocks and stuff like that. But yeah, if you found a house that was built in like 1920, that's considered an old house here.
Yes.
Because that's kind of how fresh all our crap is. But an 1817 church is almost impossible to find, right? Around that's here in America, especially this far west. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was one of the pivots. We also were really big in the whole Jesse James cowboy outlaw stuff. There's a lot of that around here too, a lot of history. There's a town just north of me called Buckner, and that was like one of the outlaw strongholds kind of thing. That's where like all the anarchy and cowboy gunslingers were, and like you weren't supposed to go there unless you were tough as shit. You know what I mean? If you could handle your own, and like it was like one of the no-go zones for the normies. Like, don't go there. That's where all the outlaws and criminals hang out. And I personally know the mayor of Buckner now. He's a cool guy, but he goes to that church that was built in 1817 with my grandma.
That's pretty cool. I did a trip out to Dodge City, I think in Kansas. And that was kind of their outlaw space as well, right? That was a whole, and they have like this recreated town. You could go there and reenact. They got like a saloon and a bartender, and everybody's in character. It's pretty fun. I had some good pictures with like one of the saloon girls and shit. It was like really cool.
Yeah, frontier life, man. It was
frontier life. Oh,
it was high risk, high reward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a unique story on the world stage. Like somebody asked me recently, in light of certain political realities taking place in the US, somebody asked me, where else can they go in the world where there's freedom of speech, gun culture, and limited government that doesn't intervene as aggressively as it appears it's going right now. And I couldn't think of a single place. The closest I could probably come up with was Switzerland. But even that is now under influence of the European Union, and they seem to be kind of fighting back on it because they kind of want to take back their freedoms, and the EU's kind of infringed on their gun rights.
Yeah,
but there's nowhere else.
Switzerland doesn't have a lot of guns, I don't think. Yeah.
No, they do, but it's not handguns, it's rifles, because the military is the people, right? So everybody does national service and everybody has a gun, but the ammunition is locked up, and it's usually like a weapon, right? Like a full-on rifle of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have a standing army. The people are the army, and the mountains basically keep the enemies out, right? They'll blow the tunnels and they could be isolated from the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
But that's it. There's nowhere else that has the unique combination of what makes America, America.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there's lip service to it, such as places in Europe, for instance, the UK, which is probably closest aligned to the United States, we don't have freedom of speech.
Yeah.
We have hate speech laws. People get arrested out here for jokes, right? Count Dankula being a good example. We don't have the right to defend ourselves, right? You can't even have pepper spray or like a non-lethal anything, right? And if somebody comes into your house, like if somebody walked up my stairs right now and he doesn't have a knife and I pull a knife and he dies, I go to jail because I used excessive force. He was unarmed, right? Or the minute I knock him out, if I punched him and he's on the ground, I can't do anything else to him because the threat is eliminated. I have to leave him there. Like if I do anything to just like bind him or anything beyond that, that's excessive force. So there's nowhere else.
It's so bad. It's so
Yeah,
bad.
no, self-defense is illegal in the UK. So there's nowhere else in the world. And I give Jack his jacket, give credit where credit is due, that has that unique combination of what America has.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of, it's terrifying what's going on now with some of the things, but those of us living in countries outside of that who don't have any of those protections,
Mm-hmm.
The UK is one of 3 countries in the world that does not have a codified constitution.
Yeah.
We look upon those things and be like, yeah, what y'all have is very unique and very special.
Mm-hmm. Good. America.
Bald
eagle screech. We need a bald eagle screech soundbite.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you been? I watched like 5 minutes of this Netflix show.
Oh God. Yeah. I made it 7 minutes. I couldn't take it, dude. It was so bad.
It was so bad. It was so fucking bad.
Yeah.
What is it called? Like America, the Telling of America or something like that?
Yeah, it was like America the movie or something like that.
Something like that. It was so terrible.
Yeah.
I got to the part where Abraham Lincoln got like he's shot in the neck with George Washington. He's bleeding out. And I was like, this is
that's
like
right.
having a conversation. Yeah, bleeding out.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Click. This is stupid.
Yeah, it was the dumbest thing. Yeah, feel free to watch that if you don't need your brain cells.
Yeah,
strong recommendation if you just want to hurt yourself mentally. If you want to.
Another classic one that I have to give props to, if you really switch your brain off, is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, actually, someone got that for me on Blu-ray, and I never got around to watching it.
It's, obviously, it's ridiculous, but you gotta watch it. It's just like, this is too funny and too fun to. Obviously, not taking it seriously, but that was actually quite entertaining. I have to admit. Yeah,
actually, it's funny. My senior high school speech was on Abraham Lincoln as a time traveler to save us from Gorgatron 5000. In the year 250 AG after Gorgatron.
I love it. It. That's great.
Yeah, because they wanted us to do so my graduating class was 27 people. I went to a very small school. So all of the seniors graduating were there was 27 of us out of like 110 people in the whole high school. And you were supposed to write this 1-page letter, like thanking your mom and your dad for everything and which teachers and your friends and blah, blah, blah. And it's supposed to be heartwarming. And we had to have a bunch of roses and hand out to them while somebody reads that, because someone else reads our speech. And I'm like, I'm going to fuck with this so much. And so what I did is I bought a bunch of I bought like 10 roses. You're supposed to buy them too. It was like a fundraiser. It was dumb. You're supposed to hand it to your mom and your grandma and your sister and all the girls in your life or whatever. And I bought a bunch. I bought like 10. And while the old lady, like HR lady, on the desk was reading my paper about Gorgatron 5000, I took them and started throwing them to random people in the audience behind my back like it was a rock concert.
Oh,
And I was like, fuck
brilliant.
this school. This is so stupid. So that was my going out in a blaze of glory for my high school that I hated.
I would have loved to see that. That would have
Yeah.
been awesome.
Yeah.
Good times.
And
Good times.
I did save one rose, and instead of giving it to my family, I gave it to my football coach, and I tried to give him this long, passionate hug, because just to make it as awkward as possible. So, because he was, he was like the Christian Tradcon man, and I was like, I gave him my rose. It was hilarious.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
take that Tradcon Christian church school I went to.
I mean, just on one side note of that, even to this day, the like Prince Charles and the royal family and stuff like that still talk about you guys as the colonies.
Oh, really?
And in fact, I think there's not really a dispute, but the British embassy in Washington, D.C., I believe, they don't own the land, right? So it's obviously like a lease agreement and stuff like that. And sorry. It's in the UK. So it's the American embassy in London. They don't own the land. They just own like a lease. They lease it for every 25 or something years, because the land is actually owned by one of the dukes of the royal family. It's his land.
Mm-hmm.
So the government kind of approached him and been like, we would like to purchase the land. We're willing to pay, so much more about market and whatever. And his response is, I'll give you the land when you give us back the colonies in the West.
Oh, geez.
So,
good luck.
They just moved the embassy. They just bought it somewhere else.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's funny, man. It's
good. Alrighty, I'm going to throw the invite link in the chat if you guys want to come in and chat, because that's the end of my notes. Was there anything you wanted to hit on that we didn't hit on?
No, I think what you've laid out is very interesting. And again, if you want to see the difference of what religion, the roots of religion plays into a society, you look at Russia, for instance, to see what is the root of orthodoxy. You look to Latin America to see the roots of Catholicism. You look to North America, specifically the US and Canada, for the fruits of Protestantism. England, to a certain degree, has that as well. And those are the echoes of what the religion or your particular branch of religion has over, the society and stuff like that. So I think it's an interesting study, and you see how these places have developed very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a pretty interesting take on things,
Yeah. Very rarely anywhere else in the world can you go to a McDonald's wearing flip-flops, a trucker hat, and strapped,
That's probably
true.
On your hip.
Yeah, that's just some random dad.
I mean, they do. I have seen pictures of girls walking into places with guns on their back in Switzerland. And of course, you see it in Israel all the time. The teachers walk around with guns on their back. But yeah, it's pretty unique what you guys have, man, because these people do it for defense. You guys do it for fun.
There's a difference between the Second Amendment and gun culture, right?
Yes.
Because we're full capitalism, gun, free market, mostly.
Yes.
They put some dumb regulations and stuff. But yeah, the gun culture of doing it for fun and owning dozens of guns, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And shooting for fun. It's pretty cool. But we got Tom in the back. We're going to bring
All
Tom
right.
in. What's up, Tom?
Hey, Tom. Good to see you, man.
Oh, yeah. Happy 4th of July. Happy MERICA
Happy 4th
Day.
of July, man. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm going to the beach.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Which beach are you going to? You're in Florida. Oh, brilliant.
Oh, yeah, I heard they got a lot of beaches there. It's mostly beach.
Mostly.
I mean, everything's opened in Florida, isn't it? That's kind of why everyone's hanging out there.
Yeah. It's open. It's great. I love it.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, man. Did you have a comment, question, or something like that, man?
No.
You're just checking in, bro.
Checking in, bro. Yeah. Happy 4th, guys.
Yep, happy 4th, man.
Awesome. Take some pictures, man. If you're doing any grilling, we did some grilling out here, actually. Like, friend invited me over for a barbecue, but he had no meat. So we basically ended up with just sausages.
It makes me mad.
Yeah, it's not the same. I do miss the 4th of July celebrations I was at in the US. So make the most of it, Tom.
All right. Cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care, bro.
Yep. we're grilling here. I'm having people over at my place. We went over this off air, so I might as well say it on air. But yeah, we're doing some 4th of July hangouts at my place. The renters left last night, so after this, I got to go, clean and tidy up the kitchen and the main public areas. I'll deal with the bedrooms and bathroom like when we actually get renters again. Hopefully, no one's staying over. Nice. But yeah, we're gonna. My grill isn't that big because it's usually just me and I let renters use it, kind of thing. But we're gonna have like 10 or 15 people over, so we're doing just hot dogs and brats because we can fit more of them on the grill.
Good.
Because if we went with burgers, we would only cook like 5 or 6 at a time, and like that's annoying with 15 people. So
that's pretty cool, though. I did a 4th of July in Kansas. I was supposed to do one in Texas, but it didn't work out.
Fun. Yeah.
Oh God, Americana up your ass, man. But yeah, it's you guys have a great celebration. It's beautiful weather. Hopefully it's nice. It's not too cold out. It's not too hot. Yeah. So, all the best to you and, all people celebrating today. Because ironically, America's not the only one that celebrates on the 4th of July. A lot of people celebrate with you. Yeah. So there's actually a big 4th of July party in London today. And it's like on the Thames and, barbecues and, big American flags and stuff like that. So yeah, pockets of freedom around the world. You gotta
admit it's pretty ironic though. It's a little bit.
It is
a little bit ironic.
Well, I mean,
celebrating the holiday of the losing team. The losing team celebrating the winner. Yeah, it's a little funny.
It is. Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. And I know that like Hungary and Poland and stuff like that, they're very, they show solidarity and stuff like that. As again, you guys have something unique. It's unfortunate. It seems to be kind of crumbling a little bit on the fray, definitely on the edges. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an amazing story. It is an amazing story. And in fact, the rest of the world is trying to emulate it. So
not well, but they're trying.
Yeah. We're doing it backward. Even like out here in the UK, I think 1998, we implemented the Supreme Court, which is the fourth, the third branch of government for the judiciary, right? So you got the judiciary, the executive, and like the Commons or the Parliament, the legislature, which is Charles Montesquieu, comes from the French Revolution. We never really had that in the parliamentary system of the UK. Yeah. Right. We have the executive as the Queen. We have the House of Lords, and we've got the legislature. So the House and Lords and the Commons is the legislature. And we had the common law. So every judge was kind of interpreting and, the higher court and stuff. And they were kind of all just jumping all over each other. Yeah. Until we established the Supreme Court. And we got that from you guys.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but because our Supreme Court opposed Brexit, but you can.
I think it all kind of comes down to the whole America's relatively new, and we had the fresh start, right? We got the blank slate, and thankfully, even though arguably they weren't Christians, they were still had some, God.
Oh, they were
generic God religious,
savvy, and they understood religion and other things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that saying, what would the founding fathers think of us today? And they'd all probably be pissed. But it set us up for less failure than a lot of the other countries.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
It might be too soon to say that for sure, right? You don't forget, right? England is over almost 1,000 years old, right? France and these countries of Europe are hundreds of years. So we look at you guys like the little kid at the table, right? Yeah. You've only been around for 250
we got all the money
years.
And guns and power. Yeah.
The only reason we're listening to you is because you're rich, right? You are the Bill Gates of like the medical world. It's just because you're rich and you have the biggest guns. But in terms of political philosophy, you guys are kind of the rest of us kind of look upon you like you're not even, you don't even have a history, right? You're like the new kid on the block. So let's wait and see. That's kind of the attitude.
One day you guys will be cool with us. We're like the cool new hip guys. Like we're like early Bitcoin adopters, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's stupid. You need a 401k."
It's like I've been holding gold for years,
Yeah, that's kind of the analogy I see it as. It's like, we got lucky because we got the blank slate and we got in right when the Industrial Revolution's happening, and like all of our foundations got to be aligned with the top of the science and technology of the day, kind of thing.
Correct.
And so that's one of the hard parts is trying to deal with old laws trying to deal with new circumstances, right?
Correct.
Doesn't always work out well.
True.
it's a lot of growing
we'll see.
pains. Yeah,
we'll see.
All righty, but I think we could end it there. Go
Awesome.
celebrate. You got any final thoughts, Brooke? Anything to pitch?
No, just God bless America. You guys have been a force in the world. You guys are pretty cool. A lot of my friends are out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, and hope everybody has a great 4th of July. To all the listeners, thanks for joining us. And yeah.
All righty. Well, 4th of July. Happy to everyone there. Happy Independence Day. Go blow up some stuff and drink some beer if you'd like. Just make sure you have 10 fingers tomorrow. All right.
Awesome.